أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين اللهم اجعلنا منهم ومن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر آمين يا رب العالمين ثم ما بعد ثانية السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So once again we're going to try to wrap up the discussion on the ayah and just try to cover some of the themes that I left out before. Some things that I want to pick up from وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ, the second one. The second time Allah mentions in the ayah, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ. Everything before then we've kind of covered pretty exhaustively. So, abda yubdi, to make something apparent, to make something obvious. Bada yabdu is when something appears. The word zina, interestingly, which is commonly translated as beauty, is different from the word jamal. The word jamal in the Arabic language comes from the word jamal, which actually is camel, and the camels were something beautiful to them, and so they associated it with something beautiful. So that's where the word jamal or jamil, those words come from. Okay, the word zina, interestingly, the original word is az-zain. Az-zain actually means to have a pretty face, or beauty of the face is az-zain, and ugliness of the face or a disfigured face or a hideous face is called ash-shayn with a sheen. Ash-shayn. Az-zaynu khilafu ash-shayn. Okay? So a scholar by the name of Al-Azhari was trying to figure out the meanings of words and things like that, and he went into some desolate village of the Arabs and he saw this kid taunting this other kid saying, Wajhi zaynun wa wajhuka shaynun. My face is zayn, your face is shayn. Etc. Okay? But additionally, the word zayn, what's the face? Think of a palm tree. What's the face of a palm tree? It's head, its top, right? So when a palm tree matures, they say tazayyanat an-nakhla. When its leaves come all out and it fully blooms, then that's what they use the word tazayyana. We do the word sarf of tazayyana in class actually, zayyana and tazayyana, right? So they use the expression tazayyanat an-nakhla for that. Interestingly, the Quran, in talking about the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ said, Zayyinu al-Qur'ana bi aswatikum. The amr was used, Zayyinu al-Qur'ana bi aswatikum. You remember the meaning of zayyana as opposed to tazayyana? What did zayyana mean? To beautify, right? So Allah's Messenger is telling us, alayhi salatu wasalam, the Quran itself is beautiful, but it needs to be beautified for the people. In other words, like a diamond, for example, right? A diamond in the rough, as the expression goes, is still a diamond. But you need somebody to actually dust off the dust that's hiding its beauty from people and expose what it really is. Gold can be it can be a beautiful thing, but you got to turn it into jewelry. Quran itself is beautiful, but its beauty comes out with our voices. Zayyinul Qur'ana bi aswatikum. And it's really beautiful that this hadith has multiple dimensions. One dimension of it is, of course, recite the Quran beautifully, and thus it will expose the beauty of the Quran. I'm really excited for you guys on Sunday, inshallah. Sheikh Abu Bakr is doing a pretty phenomenal session with you on the miracle of the Quran from 3 perspectives. So it's going to be pretty awesome, inshallah. And one of them will be the miracle of the Quran from the perspective of sound, from just how it sounds. So he'll share some of his insights on that with you guys, inshallah. But anyway, so the idea of tazyin of Quran with tasawt isn't just actually related to or limited to recitation. It actually also means speak of the Quran in a way that instills its beauty, its appreciation of its beauty in others. Meaning use your voice, use your power to speak, to express or to illustrate the beauty of the Quran. Now this has another implication. It actually means that if you don't do so, you can present the Quran in a way that can become ugly. It can actually disfigure what the Quran actually is to people if you don't watch it. Now, in our society and in contemporary times, unfortunately, this is a pretty sad reality. For a lot of people, the Quran was presented in such a hideous way, and it was presented in such an indecent way, that their impression of the Quran itself is that it's something hideous, ma'adallah. But that actually has to do with a lack of tazyin of the Quran through the one presenting it, right? And this is something you would think, oh, how can you say that? Quran itself, it should be on its own, beautiful on its own, etc. Actually, what the Rasul ﷺ called al-bayyina, or what the Quran called al-bayyina. لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين منفكين حتى تأتيهم البينة. Right? The way al-bayyina was defined in the Quran is in the next ayah. رسول من الله يتلو صحفا مطهرة. There are two parts of that. There's رسول من الله, and then there is يتلو صحفا. So it's the messenger of Allah on the one hand, and then he's reciting these suhuf. So it's the beauty of the character and the presentation even of the Rasul ﷺ, and it's the message itself. In modern studies, they call this the medium and the message. And in media studies, they call it the medium is the message. Right? In media studies, one of the first lessons they teach you is the medium is the message, meaning the way you present something is in fact going to entirely determine how it's going to be processed. You're my brother, telling somebody you're my brother, or something even simpler, telling somebody assalamu alaikum, isn't not, those words themselves are beautiful, but you can say them in a really ugly way. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. There are ways to say it that are condescending, dismissive. There's a way to say assalamu alaikum that's sarcastic. Oh, assalamu alaikum. It's the same words. You didn't change the words, but you made them ugly. So you could take beautiful words like alhamdulillah, and you can use them in an ugly way, can't you? We're pretty good at that. MashaAllah, astaghfirullah, ittaqullah. These are beautiful words, but they can be made ugly because of the human aspect to them. So in the wisdom of our deen, we acknowledge that the teachings themselves may be perfect, but people aren't. So people have to go out of their way and make an effort to try to give off or to exemplify the beauty of the message itself in the way they present it. That's really important, you know. And it can change entirely how a person perceives the religion of Allah. It changes it entirely, you know. So anyhow, these were some things about zina. So it has to do with presentation. It has to do with the outwardly. It has to do with how something is perceived. And that's the other important note. Zina is about outer beauty more than it is about inner beauty. Okay? Zina is about apparent outer beauty. Jamal can be about inner beauty too, some argue. But zina is actually more so about outer beauty. And that's why the zina of the earth, for example, is when the plants come out and you can see them. The earth always had the power to give life. The seed was already inside. The roots were spreading. Life was happening. There were some beautiful things happening inside the earth. But it's called an earth that is, muzayyan or muzayyana, right? Or mutazayyina, when its beauty becomes apparent. So the word zina in the ayah, coming back to the ayah now, is supposed to be understood in the sense of aspects of a woman's beauty that are obvious, that come out, that are physical in nature. And that's why I was even including, mannerisms and things like that may be found attractive to some, right? So becoming overly casual, friendly, giggly, things like that. That's an aspect of zina. وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ. Girls don't know, like when they go to high school or college and things like that, they don't know the effect their smile has on a 15-year-old boy. They don't know. This boy, his head is like spinning because he saw this girl smile. Like he's in class, but he's traveling. He's on a spiritual journey at this time. And I'm calling it spiritual sarcastically. But, because she smiled. And the smile is just, like, what's the big deal, smile? These boys are so weird. Yes, they are, actually. That is what it is. So, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ. They shouldn't expose their beauty. Now, of course, the context of the ayah primarily is first, guard yourself in terms of your physical appearance, what is most attractive to men and things like that. And that's going to come up as the ayah continues. Now, a very beautiful word. إِلَّا لِبُعُولَتِهِنَّ. They should not expose their beauty except to and it's translated except their husbands. Bu'ul, from ba'al. Ba'al is the singular, is like zawj. It's one of the words in the Arabic language for zawj. Okay? But ba'al is a very interesting word for spouse or for husband, as opposed to zawj. And it's got a really interesting, role in this ayah. Why pick this word and why not just pick illa li, azwajihinna? Why bu'ulatihinna? Bu'ula is the plural, right? The word ba'al, it comes originally for elevated land. Al-ardu al-murtafi'atu, allati la yusibuha matar illa marra wahida fi sanatin. It's elevated land that rain cannot get to except once in a year. And it's actually used for trees or plant life or shrubs and things like that, which do not need water, like evergreen type stuff. They don't need much water. They can survive. Or desert plants that can survive for a long time without water. In other words, they're independent. Their independence is highlighted in the word ba'al. That's why لا يصيبها سيح ولا سيل, no water, no flood, never hits it. قال سلاما, it's still good. It's still sound. The plant doesn't die as a result of that deprivation. So in other words, its source of life and rejuvenation is just one. Just this one-time water, and otherwise it's fine. It doesn't need anything more. Okay? And I'll tie it to the meaning of husband in a second. أنثها على معنى الأرض وقيل البعل كل شجر أو زرع لا يسقى. Ba'al is used for every tree or every kind of crop that doesn't need to be watered. And al-ba'al wal-'adhyu wahid, they say also ba'al and the one who is perfectly healthy, independent, doesn't need medication, doesn't need a lot of upkeep, is the same word. This actually suggests somebody who's in a relationship in which they are so happy with their spouse, they don't wonder about anything else. They don't ever wonder, I don't know, what about a second? What if I left her and just kind of explored what else is out there in the universe of women, etc. Nope, that's a ba'al. This guy is like that tree that just one source of water, one time, I'm good. He's happy. And it's the suggestion of ba'al is a husband who is obsessed with his wife and she's enough for him. And it's interesting that Allah says, you shouldn't show your beauty except to your ba'al. And this is very powerful because then Allah is saying, look, he feels this way about you and you should feel that way about showing your beauty to him. The way you should express your beauty and the way you should look beautiful is especially for him. You should go out of your way to beautify yourself for him. I realize some of this conversation is going to be PG-13. Sorry. It has to be done. And those of you that are going to watch the recording one day, cover the kids' ears. Okay. I won't get too explicit though, it's okay. On the subject of explicit language, the Quran talks about intimacy between husband and wife on multiple occasions, and never once does it use an explicit term. It's beautiful. There are 10 or 12 words used, not one of them is explicit. Everything's kinaya, everything's kind of take a hint, everything's kind of alluding to something, and he just doesn't come out and say it. We're living in a society where these things are talked about, but they're talked about in very explicit, dirty, disgusting, graphic language, right? Now, sometimes these things have to be talked about. This is part of family education. This is part of marital education. This is part of your life. You have to learn this stuff. So there seems to be a conflict, right? Do we talk about these things? And if we talk about these things, I guess we should just be open about it and just say stuff and say things. Well, you know what? The Quran gives us this perfect balance. You can talk about these things while not losing your decency. You can talk about these things while not using super explicit graphic language. People can take إِنَّ اللَّبِيبَ مِنَ الْإِشَارَةِ يَفْهَمُ. You can say things in a way that doesn't embarrass people. It doesn't conjure up bad imagery. It doesn't expose people to language that they shouldn't naturally be exposed to, especially not in a religious or a decent setting. And yet you can still address these topics. It's really beautiful. Okay? So I don't have to go any further in explaining what bu'ula means. It's obvious. I don't have to go any further in explaining what zina means. It's obvious. Even the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about the woman's body. He said, when he talked about her covering herself, what was the word used? Juyubihinna. Juyub is the cavity, the bone. Look at that. There are other more explicit words found in the Arabic language. They could have been used, but they would have been embarrassing. They would have been indecent. You could understand, you can get the point if I just say chest cavity. If I just say the bone right here, it's good enough for you. And it doesn't, when you say that cavity or that bone, there's not going to be a 17, 18-year-old sitting in the other going, like he won't do that. Because, explicit words didn't come up. So it's really wise how Allah Azza wa Jal addresses this stuff. It's a really beautiful thing. Anyway, so this is a ba'al. Someone who, and by the way, the verb that comes from it is taba'ala. You give me the sarf a little bit. Taba'ala, yataba'alu, taba'ulan. This verb is not used for men. This verb is not used for men. It's only used for women. So it's only taba'alat, tataba'alu. Like, talidu, for example, to give birth, or arda'at, to breastfeed. It's not going to be used for a man. It only makes sense, arda'at, right? So taba'alat is actually only used for women. You don't find huwa taba'ala. You could say that in sarf, but taba'ala means she beautified herself for her husband. As one verb that captures, she went out of her way to make sure her husband remains ba'al, meaning he remains obsessed with her. So she beautified herself, she took care of herself so that he could maintain his emotional attachment and his infatuation and his love and his attraction towards him. So تزينت. وامرأة حسنة التبعل إذا كانت مطاوعة لزوجها محبة له. It's also a woman that is good at taba'ul, is a woman that is very compatible with her husband. She's always trying to make sure her husband's happy with her out of love for him. That's how the verb is translated. This is not the verb in the Quran. This is not a verb in the ayah. But this is related to the word ba'al. Okay? Now, that's one thing that before we go further that needs to be talked about. Why is it that there is so much celebration of promiscuity and being a player and how many points you can score, let's just say, etc., in modern society? Why is that? Why is that such an accomplishment? You have music artists, actors, things like that, who celebrate having a relationship with this one, then with that one, then with that one, and people follow these tabloids like crazy. Who's with who, and then who's with who, and then who's with who. In high school, you guys have, if you've gone to American high school, this one broke up with that one, now they're with that one, now they're with this one, now they're with that one. There's this like popularity context of who's with who and the dating scene and all of that. Why is there such an obsession with this stuff? I mean, you have to take a step back and say, how did this happen? Because this is not a historical phenomenon. This kind of thing among young people, this kind of open promiscuity and and what the prom has turned into, what it symbolizes, what it's supposed to be, and what coming of age means, what college means, what spring break means. These ideas have permeated a young generation post the 60s. Like beyond the 60s, something happened in the 60s, which you guys know about or hopefully are familiar with, that opened this scene up, not just in the United States, but because the United States is a cultural center for the globe, it's permeated to many, 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 many cultures around the world, right? And so you'll find cultures are supposed to be distinct and unique, right? So Indian culture is supposed to be very different from Chinese culture. It's supposed to be very different from, African culture. And that's supposed to be very different from American culture. But, as capitalism and globalization grew, so did some of these crazy revolutionary values that are, I don't even, calling them values is an exaggeration, but they grew and they became almost globalized. So you'll find, for example, in China, they have their own traditions of music, they have their own traditions of marriage, they have their own traditions of, courting a woman and proposing for marriage and all of this other stuff. But the high school scene in China is actually almost identical to the high school scene in Flint, Michigan. It's not different. The high school scene in Pakistan, in Lahore, is the same as Bombay, which is the same as New York City. It's crazy. But this has happened. And it's a major deterioration in one institution. You would think this is a social problem. You would think this is an economic problem. At the heart of it, it's a family disintegrating. At the heart of it all is a family that fell apart. Because when a boy, for example, decides that he's going to have a girlfriend, or a girl decides that they're going to have a boyfriend and all of this sort of thing, there is something about the nature of relationships they have inside the home that is not meeting a particular need. A void is, there's a human void. Human beings need to have healthy relationships from an early age. They need that. They need validation. They need to feel, complimented. They need to feel supported. They need to feel somebody cares about them, somebody they can talk to. Most girls end up with relationships, premature relationships with boys, because they say, he understands me. He listens to me. We can talk about anything. We talk for hours. He gets me. And guess what? These are the same girls. Do they have these long, heartfelt, open, long conversations with their fathers, their brothers, their mothers? No. Actually, I can't stand my brother. My dad just gets mad all the time. You know? My mom doesn't understand. She doesn't even know what I'm going through. These are the same kids that are going to end up in a dating kind of relationship. And actually, there's a logical explanation. The explanation is there's a relationship void inside the house. And human beings, by nature, of course, there's the hormone side of it, but don't just limit it to the hormonal problem. The word ba'al is important also because a husband here doesn't just have a relationship with his wife because they're in a marriage contract, but he's obsessed with her. She's his world. He doesn't need to get, this is a tree that doesn't even think about water from anywhere else. I'm good. You know? And there are some people, if you're working in the corporate environment, when I used to work in the corporate environment, for a little bit after I got married, and even when I was engaged, I used to work in a corporate, actually all of my coworkers were non-Muslims, right? And so, hey, Norman, you got engaged. It's not Norman, it's Norman. Oh, Newman, sorry, Newman. Newman, you got engaged. You sure you want to commit to just one woman? You sure you want to do that? And the idea of commitment to them is like limiting and restrictive. Why? Because they've never found fulfillment in any one relationship. They've never actually known what it means to have a serious relationship, a real relationship. It's just about it's capitalism in relationships. That's what it is. What do I mean by capitalism in relationships? In capitalism, who are you looking out for? Yourself. You have certain things you want from this. This is why you're in this relationship. A relationship in especially dating isn't about the other, it's about yourself. It's about how you feel, what pleasures you get, what kind of cred you can have. And because it's all about yourself and either furthering your pleasure or furthering your status, you can have this crazy situation where a guy is dating a girl and he's posting a picture, check out my girlfriend. Look at how beautiful my girlfriend is. This is unheard of in human history, that you would flaunt the one you have a relationship with because you want to protect their beauty from everyone else. You're protective of that, but now you want to check it out. Look what I got. Because to you now, this is not a human being anymore. This is just like a car. It's like a thing you have. You just show it off.